So the next talk is by Rudolph Bott on hacking work at Zipgate. Welcome.
Test. Hello. Oh. Hello, everyone. Good to be here again. Is anyone in the room who wasn't here yesterday on our technical talk? Okay, I'll do a quick recap of who we are. Okay, second. Okay. Zipgate is a mobile telecommunications, or actually a telecommunications provider based in Germany, in Düsseldorf. We have a business in Germany and UK. So we offer voice over IP phone services and also mobile phone services and APIs for real-time communication manipulation. You can have inbound APIs, outbound APIs, do all sort of things you would like to do or would not like to do to phone calls. This is actually the slide we also saw yesterday, so what we're actually doing, and this is probably half the truth, because we've been there a bit longer than you might expect. Actually, we started in 1998. Our two founders started a website named billigertelefonieren.de, which was one of the first, I think one of the first comparison websites in Germany when the phone market was liberated, and that gave you the option to find the cheapest phone provider to place your next call, or to choose the cheapest phone provider for your home line. 2 years later, we had a very good idea to buy one of the rather short top-level domain, and actually rather short domain, which was sms.de, and that was a service which ran until 2 years ago, I think, and that gave users the option to send text messages for free to existing phone numbers of other people with a short piece of advertisement at the end. And at a later point, we also started to have a paid option where you could just top up your credit and send SMS without advertisement in it. 2004, we had, among others before, we had one idea to do something with SIP and voice over IP and phone stuff. And as you may have figured, this has now become our main source of income, I guess. We started with Zipgate Basic. This was our private customer product back then, which still exists. It offers you a free landline phone number, and you can place calls for free to other Zipgate customers, and you can top you up with credit and call regular numbers in whatever destination you might want to call, and of course you can receive calls. A bit later, we decided to do the same thing, but in on a professional level for business customers, which means a virtual PBX, or a hosted PBX, which means we host whatever PBX systems or whatever you would expect from a PBX, and you only have the IP phones in your office or home office or wherever. So this product is named Zipgate Team, and this was a breaking change in how our company worked, because up to then we just, worked and programmed and did stuff, and we kind of locked ourselves into the basement, or at least a part of the company, to design and develop this Zipgate Team platform, which probably took, I think, 3 years. But at the same time, our private customer product, which was Zipgate Basic, or is Zipgate Basic, kind of had exploding customer numbers, and we had like six-digit customer figures to deal with, and that was kind of hard. And by the time this Zipgate Team product was launched, our two founders said, well, this was a nice attempt, but we won't probably be able to do that again, so if it fails. And luckily, Zipgate Team didn't fail. It's actually the main thing that drives our company as of today. But if that would have failed, it would have been 3 years of development for nothing. And we know that we have to come up with new products on a regular basis to find the new Zipgate Team for whatever the next 10 or 50 or 20 years. And that wouldn't work if we would have to lock in ourselves in the basement for 3 years and hope that whatever comes out would be accepted by the market. So this is where we started with Scrum back then for development, and our bosses just said, well, we'll we'll do Scrum. We do Scrum by the book, which means we don't adapt Scrum to whatever we want, or we try to find out processes that work for us. We just figured out that it was the best way to just do it as it's intended to be done. And that's where this story actually starts. And a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, we published a small book. I have a few copies here. This book actually kind of tries to cover all those, or many of those aspects we have changed or tried out since that year, since 2009, 2010, on our probably agile journey, as others would put it on a marketing slide or something like that. And I try to give you some insights on these, and to make it not as boring, I try to, whenever we talk about a chapter, we try to do some kind of interactive feedback after that to see if you have any questions. So today we're around 170 employees. When we started with that, 2009, we were around 60, I think. And all of those 180 employees today, there's probably 40 to 50 tech people, like software engineers, system engineers, and the rest is back office, legal, customer service, etc. As you can see here, we have one of our employees also. He's an artist, and for one thing he does is he's drawing each employee. But he also takes care of figuring out what art to put on the walls in the office, because we have lots of that. So as I said, Scrum was the way to go back in 2010 for software development. As good as that was for the software developers, that was a huge problem for the rest, because, for example, I've been with Zipgate since 2012, so I joined slightly after that, after the transformation. Since all those software development teams got pretty fast, that actually made clear that the admin guys are pretty slow, and too slow to deliver anything that's useful to those software development teams. So we had to figure out something that makes us also faster. Scrum wasn't a good option in our opinion, because if you do system maintenance and set up servers and databases and whatnot, Scrum with its predefined sprints, for example, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it's probably too static to react to important things. For example, if we need a new database, we probably can't tell our customers, well, sure, but it'll take 2 weeks because we have our sprint already planned. Or if one of our colleagues says, well, my screen broke or my laptop broke, and probably it's not a good idea to tell him that, yeah, well, I'll plan to buy you a new screen in the next sprint. So that's why we came up with a kanban. Does anyone know kanban here? Maybe. Okay. Because the good thing about kanban is it's not like a process like Scrum where you actually change the entire way you work or think. Kanban actually is it's about visualizing what you're already doing and then figuring out where to get better. All those pictures are actually from our office, and at least there's one proof that I'm in the picture, but these are not stock photos. So the main rule for Kanban is start where you are. Don't try to figure out well what you do when you work after or with Kanban, but just start where you are. For example, visualize the processes you have, or visualize workflow. Just use a whiteboard and stickies and whatever, and try to see where you get stuck, where you wait, what if you have to wait for external resources or whatever it does take to get your job done. Limit your work in progress. Don't do like 50 jobs at the same time. For example, if someone requests a server, try to handle that request until it's finished, because if you buy the server but you stop doing that and help someone else and you don't wreck the server, the guy who wanted the server, he doesn't get anything out of that. If you tell him, well, it's there, it sits here, but that's of no help for him. So limit your work in progress and try to finish what you've started. And either finish it to a point it helps someone, or just said, well, that this has failed for some reason and you need to improve there. Oh, I'm slightly ahead of my slides. Yeah, measure and improve. So look where you get stuck. For example, you can use, we use lots of those magnetic stripes to form tables or some sort of columns on our whiteboards to visualize where we are in a certain process and which kind of tasks have already been finished and which are waiting on whom. And this is actually something that really spun up the speed in our operations team, and helped us. Oh, sorry, and helped us to adapt to the speed the Scrum teams had already picked up, and that made the admin team less of an annoyance to them. I think. Does anyone know the concept of flight levels within Kanban? It's probably not as known. This is a term, I think it has been coined by a guy named, I forgot the name, sorry. I'll look it up later. Well, anyways, you can actually play the Kanban game on different levels. And the first flight level is, for example, managing work in your team. So this is what we did. We just tried to optimize how our team worked internally. The next flight level would be if you have someone managing multiple teams, and if he would use Kanban to organize the work they do. It's like more of managing the people, not the work. And flight level 3 is actually if your company does Kanban on some sort of company level, and for example for products. So you have like the head of your company and whoever is responsible for products. If they use Kanban to visualize what kind of products we have, in which stage are they? Is there some product maybe unmaintained, and who's working on what, and what is the next thing that's going to happen there? And the same principles apply here. You want to probably limit your work in progress. For example, don't do 18 changes at the same time to that one product, and you're probably not going to finish one of them. So just focus on one task for the product. But this is what we call flight levels. Well, and it's pull, not push. It means if you work on a Kanban board, you always pull something. For example, you pull the next story, or in the next whatever your work, whatever way you use to organize your work there, and you always pull. You don't push, or you don't have someone like place a story or something in your work in progress column. Sorry. Any questions about Kanban so far? Okay. So the next level was, as I said, we had those Scrum teams, which usually consists out of a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a bunch of developers. And after a while, they said, well, we're already faster, and we are shipping after 2 weeks of Scrum of a sprint, but a lot of times our sprint failed because we have to wait for someone. For example, we have a UX team who help with design or texting and whatever, or we have the admin guys or whatever other teams we have. And or for example, they said we have bad communication with the customer support, so we get only slow or bad feedback from customers about the changes we have shipped. So that's when we started to redesign this a bit, and we implemented cross-functional teams, which means we kind of removed our static former teams and had each team grouped around a product, and they had all the roles in the team to work on that product. For example, they had customer support, they had developers, they had UX persons, texters, and we just had to find the right balance between who to put in the team and who not. For example, you also need a lawyer if you, for example, need to update the terms of service for the product. but it's probably a bit much to hire 17 lawyers and have them in each team and sitting around and doing not that much. So you need to find a balance between who to put in a cross-functional team and who not. And there's also another problem if you have if you had dedicated teams for graphics, dedicated teams for developers, and you tear them apart and have product teams. How do those people of the same role actually communicate with each other? So you have like a whole bunch of developers who used to work together and now they work in separate teams, or a whole bunch of designers which used to work together and optimize the work and their opinions, and now they are split over many teams. And this is where we came up with communities, and we have like a developer community, admin community, and also UX communities and others. And these are just regular meetings, for example, once in 2 weeks, I think, for most of those, or actually some are once a week, wherever he's interested in that topic, just comes together for a quick meeting. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour, and this is where actually people can talk about issues like, for example, if one team intends to write a new service, a new backend service, and wants to use, for example, Python, which has not been in our stack so far, so this is a good place to talk with the other developers if that would be a good idea, or if there are reasons to use something else. The same applies to the admin team or the UX communities, where it's all about communication and having finding a unified strategy, for example. Questions about this so far? And this is actually the way it still works. So all our teams are grouped around products. This is something that can be perceived in both ways. It doesn't mean we don't do trainings, it just means we don't have a budget limit on that. A couple of years ago, we decided to... You don't have a limit or you don't have a budget? The question was, if we don't have a limit or we don't have a budget, there is no known limit. The thing is, we just said, well, from now on, we expect that each employee finds at least two means of training per year for himself. So a means of training could be attend a training or a workshop or attend a conference or whatever comes into your mind that helps you do your job better. And it's up to you to find it and to take care of, not getting there, but organize it. And if you decide to go somewhere, you actually just need to follow a few steps. For example, let someone know that it has to be booked for you, talk to your team and check if not everyone leaves at the same time, or figure out if that actually helps with what your day business is, and probably find other people who want to go with you. And we also have this giant whiteboard somewhere in the company at a prominent place where there's there are little magnets with everyone's head and name. And whenever you book a conference or a training, you just note where you're going so everyone can see where you go and probably decide to go there as well. And you also can easily spot people who don't go to conferences and tell them or ask them to maybe join you if you know something that might be of help to them. And we started that, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, and this has been very good for everyone. And from a back office point of view, or they're actually, from what I've heard, there is a budget, but they just guesstimated it for the first year and thought, well, if people just follow the order to just find conferences and whatever, and we think we might end up with this sum, and for some reason they at least that what I've been told, they just managed to hit almost the budget, but they wouldn't have stopped it if we would have gone over budget at that point. So at least that's what people tell. That's what people say. But again, this has been one of the best things or larger decisions we took in the last years, and I don't think we will change that very quickly or very soon at all, and I can only recommend it. Every once in a while the discussion spawns because sometimes people attend conferences. I'm going to try that from a different angle. We always say, well, people have to take care of their decisions, and we trust them to take the right decision. For example, if a certain conference takes place in New York, and the same conference also takes place in Cologne, you should be old enough to decide that visiting Cologne is maybe better for everyone. Although New York for sure is a nice city, but it's probably cheaper and better to visit the same conference in Cologne, unless there's a very good reason. And we just trust everyone to take the right decision and not pick the one in New York, unless there's a good reason. And sometimes the discussions spawn. For example, you use an internal communications tool like Yammer, or it's just talking to people that you meet somewhere. Why someone wants to go somewhere because other people think that it's probably a bit far away from his area of work or whatever. And all in all, this leads to so it kind of levels itself out. So there's no abuse of this offer or feature at all. Questions about this? Okay. This is also something we've done for a while. We call it Open Friday because it's every other Friday, but it's generally just known as unconferences or bar camps. Is anyone not familiar with the term bar camp or unconference? So what basically happens is every other Friday, which is the end of the Scrum sprint, at least for whoever works after Scrum, we meet. The whole company meets in the morning at 10 for kickoff. And we have this whiteboard which just names a bunch of rooms and has a time schedule on it. And you're free to put up any kind of session where you assume that it might help you, the company, or colleagues to, for example, get their work done better, or might also be for entertainment. We have seen sessions about knitting and how to actually pack a parachute. I don't know. Well, that was actually fun. But this, for example, also a way to communicate things you have learned on a conference. For example, if you went to a conference, this is a good place to share something you learned or you wanted to try out with other people. And there's just some rules and one law, and the 4 rules of the Open Friday, or for example, I guess those apply to most unconferences, is whoever comes are the right people, which means you're not allowed to invite someone. It's not a meeting. You cannot force someone to attend a meeting, and vice versa. You cannot throw someone out. If someone thinks he has something to say or add to this topic, well, he's generally welcome. And it starts when it starts, and when it's over, and it's over. That means that, well, you actually do have a timetable, and but if you put up a slot, for example, or a session, it says learning from Joy Inc., which is a book, and after 10 minutes talking about this book, the discussion shifts to some other book, which is probably interesting for some reason. You can't just stand up and say, well, the session was about this book and I want to talk about this book, because it just happens. Whatever happens, this is also quite with the 4th rule, whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened. And well, if you're after 45 minutes of your session, if it's still a hot topic and everyone is discussing, you have to leave the room because there's probably a next session, but you can just continue somewhere else. So there are no strict rules. And the law of the 2 feet is very important. If you feel that you cannot add anything to the session anymore, you're free to go. just stand up and leave, and nobody can tell, well, this is not finished, please stay seated. It's just, you're free to do whatever you want. And especially sometimes we have external visitors, and they always get confused when people just stand up and leave in the middle of the session, and it's like, is he coming back? I don't know, I guess not. He has said whatever he wanted to say and heard what he wanted to hear, and he left, or she. And this is something that started initially just with our developers, because in Scrum there's, it's called NDS, which is nach dem Sprint, or after the sprint, which is like it's the last day of your 2 weeks or whatever length sprint. And this was traditionally, it's a time where developers can which developers can dedicate to, for example, improve their workplace, reset up their workstation, read a book or whatever. And this is how it started, and from there it just evolved, and at some point we decided to let the whole company take part in that and not just developers. And this actually replaced a lot of meetings which we had and annoyed people, because you were just able to transform it into a session. And sometimes you actually, if you make a meeting and you invite people, you probably invite 50% who are not interested, and you leave out the 50% that were actually important for a certain decision, but they didn't know. So that way you can actually end up with very important input from people you just didn't think of in the first place. So this is something I can highly recommend. And we have put together some more information about this on the website, openfriday.org. So if you want to try it out or convince your boss that you should try it out, this is probably something that helps. Questions about this?
What do you think is the minimum number of people who should attend, or like a minimum size of company where it makes sense? And or do you really need 5 tracks, or is one enough? Or do you think it's really useful if there's more than one option really to go?
Well, sometimes we have an Open Friday, and although many people are there, there's like three sessions, and sometimes people stand around disappointed because they had to, they were too late in the line, and their session kind of dropped because there wasn't enough room. And I think you can start it with maybe like 8 or 10 people, probably 1 track or 2, or at most 2. And we started with, I think, 20, 25, and right now the only group or role of certificate employees who's not 100% involved is customer support, because they just can't leave the phones. At least not everyone. So they try to take part in it, but due to their job, they can't always, at least entirely, take part. But other than that, everyone is welcome, and everyone is at least supposed to be at the kickoff meeting. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just do anything on that day, besides leave. But it's very, very, very well accepted. And I think the website also has some information about minimum numbers and stuff. This is something people are usually surprised. For one, that we actually have a maximum work time limit per week, and the other thing that usually surprises people is that we use what do you call those machines in English? Like a punch card system thing, where so whenever someone comes to the office, he has to check in, and when he leaves, he has to check out. And we actually do force people to only work 40 hours a week. Well, only depending on how you look at that. If you're from the public sector, it's probably used to less, but this is our limit, and it's especially about not doing any overtime. So if there is a problem, and if you need to do some overtime today or tomorrow or whatever, that's okay. But you need to flat that out during the month or within the next weeks. And it's always also okay to, for example, store like 8 hours overtime on your account. But if this gets too much, you will, first of all, you will get a nice and friendly reminder email to lower your overtime. And if this doesn't help, your team will get this mail to check what's going on there. And that's actually something that had some attention recently when the EU decided to make this kind of accounting system mandatory. And there was actually Spiegel Online picked this up for some reason, or for a good reason, and they had they published an article about us based on this thing, which is actually something that should everyone have, I guess, because whenever you do, well, in Germany we say Vertrauensarbeitszeit, which is a nice word to describe that the company trusts you to not do overtime, and whenever you do that, usually people do overtime for various reasons. And this is the only way to not do overtime, I guess. And this is a tool that also that either helps me to not do overtime because I'm confronted with my time balance every day, and well, the company sees the same. And while we're not you are always free to have like a below zero balance for a while, and but just not too much. Transparency is also a huge thing at Zipgate, or important thing. In two ways, we have a team that's dedicated to do all things with, well, numbers and figures and stuff, and they collect whatever numbers are there to collect, and you're free to always consult them, and they provide a monthly company report which contains all the facts and figures about all of our products, and there's nothing that's missing. So, and this is available to all employees, so everyone is able to see how well a certain product is doing at any time and how well it was doing 2 years or 5 years ago. And there's everything is in there except salaries, but we have solved that problem as well, but that's a different story. The other thing with transparency is this looks rather confusing, I know, but this is actually the kanban flight level 3 thing I was talking earlier. So we have this huge pile of stickies. It's in a public place, and this, although it looks rather confusing on the picture, this is actually those 2 boards are actually one, and the other one as well, and all those lines are teams that work with Zipgate. The left part is non-product teams, or like back office, in-house IT stuff, and the one on the right are almost every team on the right is connected to a certain product. And we meet once a week with one person from all of these teams to a giant stand-up thing, and within 20 minutes, everyone gets a short update what each team is actually doing right now, and what's the current task and what's the next task. Not as a low-level report, what is every employee doing, but what's the team working currently? What's the team currently working on? And there are also lots of magnets with faces on them, because you can always check who is actually currently engaged in this team. And if at this point of time, or this slot will also be discussed if, for example, a team needs more people. And if someone says, well, we do have some spare people because we finished this one job, and now we have, for example, 3 backend developers, which have nothing to do because our next task is something with front end or whatever. So this is also the point where you can shift workforce. Do you know the term extreme programming, mob programming, and this is also something we have picked up for us a while ago. And if you see someone working alone at Zipgate, this is usually a bad sign. And you will be frowned upon if you sit alone at your screen with headphones on, because usually we always do things at least in pairs, sometimes even more. That depends on the type of work. For example, if you're just doing regular work in your sprint, something like you fix a bug or whatever, you will do this at least in a pair of two. If you work on something that's probably new, or that's a system that has rare interaction, and there's only like 3 people who have dealt with that system many decades ago, then we'll probably see something like this, or even more. So, which always means that the guy with the least, or the woman with the least knowledge, will be the one typing, and the one with the most knowledge will be farthest away and just give hints. And this usually leads to a wider spread of knowledge, especially about things that are rarely touched for whatever reason. And this was first adopted by our developers, but that also is used in system administration, even back office. In the back office, for example, if they do critical transactions or whatever, something that's complicated, they usually do that in pairs to spread the knowledge. I think probably everyone does it except the kitchen, I guess. That's probably not a good thing there, or at least not everything. When we started with Scrum, well, what you usually do is you need Scrum Masters, but if you want to try something new, you don't hire like 5 Scrum Masters just to figure out if Scrum works for you. So we did the same everyone does. We just started with asking people if they would change their role, and a few did, and none of them is Scrum Master anymore. They all went back to a former role and are developers or system engineers again. And but it doesn't work without. So we have a team of Scrum Masters, or actually agile coaches, who work with the teams to let them know how things work, to take care of the process, be it Scrum or Kanban, to remember, to remind them of limit your work in progress, or don't overextend your stand-up, and whatever else is needed. And they also facilitate retrospectives, which is actually one aspect of Scrum, and I think it's the most important one, because a retrospective means that at the end of each sprint in Scrum, you're supposed to do a retrospective, taking a look at the past sprint that just happened. And you need to figure out things that, for example, stopped you from finishing successfully the sprint. For example, some things failed and you weren't able to finish that, and this is the point to talk about that, be it, for example, slow hardware or bad planning or whatever else. And this is about technical stuff, but also about social problems that might arise in a team. For example, someone listening to someone having a bad taste of music and slowing down the development process by that, or whatever. And this is something that's mandatory for each and every team at Zipgate. So this is not something only Scrum teams do. Even the kitchen has a retrospective every 2 weeks, and everyone else as well. And they are usually facilitated by our agile coaches, and as they have a lot to do, and we don't have too many of them, teams that have been like in the same constellation for a while, they usually do them on their own, because by now they're fit enough to handle that. Or sometimes people opt in as moderators. Is that a word in English? I don't know, as facilitators and help out. But again, this is probably the most important aspect of this, because if you not retrospect and look at the past weeks, you will never get better. And this is something that keeps you in a continuous loop of getting better at whatever things. This is the book I mentioned earlier, and I have some with me. We do a quick raffle. Let's see. Oh, just a second. There's too many windows here. So since we're at the Debian conference, I'll try to ask a quick Debian question, which I did not prepare at all. I just have to find it. Okay, so there have been at least 2 or maybe more Debian project leader named Ian. Ian, sorry, Ian. How many years were people named Ian project leader in total?
4, 5.
So,
6.
still missing a correct answer here.
The first year was for a year and a half, if I remember correctly, and the second was for 2 years, but I'm not sure.
Oh, I based my information on Wikipedia. I have to add that.
Well, I read Wikipedia like 2 weeks ago, but I forgot.
If you like the book, we can fix that up.
Okay, something else. Where was the first first DebConf in 2000? Oh, that was fast. So, English or German? But I have more. Not many, but I have some. So, whoa.
Maybe we should ask if there's any questions
Yeah, well,
before we. Is there any questions? You need this mic?
So, one question.
You have a question.
Yeah, I forgot the question. So, how was the implementation done as Zipgate? Was it like snap and implementing, or how was the how did you go to that point?
well, we didn't entirely do that on our own. We got us some help from a company in Berlin, but in the end, it was kind of like a snap thing, because our bosses just said, well, that's the only way we can survive, and we will start now, and whoever doesn't want to do that, that's the door. And that also happened. So in the process of changing, not from one day to the next, but in the process of changing, we probably lost 40% of employees. But that is usually it's worse than it's not as worse as it sounds. First of all, it's not that 40% of our employees just stood up and left. It's some figured out after a while that this is not for them, and some took 4 years to figure that out, and at the same time, lots of people started or wanted to work for us because we're doing that. So that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you should keep in mind, that whatever change you implement or force or whatever, you will lose people at some point. That's why I said it's not as bad as it sounds, and it's not like you will lose half of your workforce within 2 days. At least I hope that never happens. And in the end, that's actually what made me be here, because that probably wouldn't be the case if we had tried to do things the way we did before.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You see, I have another question. But, oh yeah, well that's a good one. I guess you all know the Debian popularity contest. Have you checked the stats recently? Hey, don't cheat. So, by the means of the Debian popularity contest, what is the currently most popular package by vote? And I was kind of surprised. Any guesses? No, it's something that tells a lot about Debian, I think. It's Perl base. I expected something else. I don't know what, but not Perl base, I guess. No, but seriously, I still have some copies here, and if anyone wants to take one, I'm free. I'm happy to hand them out, and if someone wants one and there are not enough, we can also send one, or you can buy one. But I'm happy to provide one. I guess you prefer the English version. Yes. Sure. Well, just step forward, and then I can give you one. And that's it so far from us. There's just one more thing. Just a second. Then I'm done after that. Just informational. So. Oh wow, that was unexpected. So we do have different ways of interacting with us. For example, we have a regular talk thing that happens at our office, which is Liendus, which is probably not of much use of you if you're not from the area of Düsseldorf. But we have lots of talks to different topics, and they usually are being recorded, and you can see those recordings there. We have a blog which has sometimes also English technical posts, and there will also be soon a blog post about the unattended upgrades thing, what Cenk talked about yesterday. And you can also find some other stuff about Ansible and MySQL and whatnot. And there are also various ways to visit us. And actually, this was some kind of unintentional product which has spun up in the last years. Usually, we just received visitors during a lunch and showed them around. And at some point, this took away a lot of time from certain people. And well, this is how we make products by accident, because we had to channelize this and stop many people. Had to stop larger groups from visiting us, at least uninvited. And if you need any more information, feel free to visit us in Düsseldorf. And if someone is near, just contact Cenk or myself and hop by for lunch. And we'll see you in Düsseldorf. And we're also hiring, but yeah. That's it. Thank you.